into a lot of the subjects. That's for later, but what we hope to do is to give you a good solid background of what conservation districts are, why they were formed, the things that can be done by a conservation district, and really just generally some laws that make the framework of a conservation district. So as any board member will probably tell you is, and while they will admit that while the authority of the duties of a conservation district rests on them, conservation district employees are key to making a good board a great board. We hope to inspire you today with to use your skills and strengths to help your board be creative, to think outside the box and when determining their course of action, and to help them figure out what it is they actually want to do. We'll provide you with some fun ideas about how conservation district employees have made a difference, big and small, in their communities. And we have some really great speakers to talk to you today about conservation district duties, partnerships, and then we'll have a session at the end for question and answers. So if you have questions while we're going through this, use your chat feature, and if you're not yet muted, please do so. We're going to start off with a video that was produced by NACD, and it provides a really good sort of background of the history of conservation districts. It's about 10 minutes long, and barring technical issues, we should just get started on that. Mary, can you help get that started?
Soil, water, and other natural resources. Conservation districts are the heart of what nourishes and sustains our country. Established beginning in the 1930s, conservation districts have overcome challenges and adapted to build a community committed to conservation of our nation's natural resources, to provide for an ever-growing population. Conservation districts were born out of the Great Depression, a result of our nation's tremendous loss of topsoil during the Dust Bowl period, and a critical part of Hugh Hammond Bennett's vision to rescue and restore our country's fertile farmlands. In 1935, Congress established the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Soil Conservation Service, now named the Natural Resources Conservation Service, NRCS. Hugh Hammond Bennett headed and built the agency and became widely regarded as the father of soil conservation in America, thanks to his emphasis on improving soil health. In 1937, President Roosevelt recommended the Standard State Soil Conservation Districts Act to every governor in the United States. This act gave states a step-by-step guide to create conservation districts and listed what powers and responsibilities the district should have, such as conducting demonstrations, carrying out research, directing prevention and control measures, giving assistance to landowners, and supporting wise land use. Arkansas became the first state to enact legislation regarding conservation districts, followed quickly by several other states. The first district in the nation, Brown Creek Soil Conservation District, was chartered in North Carolina on August 4, 1937. By July 1, 1945, all 48 states had passed district enabling acts. Conservation districts grew stronger during the 1940s, educating communities about the need for erosion control and practical measures to combat it.
I am concerned about these youngsters of ours that are coming on, whose heritage of rich soil is being destroyed by our prevailing farm methods. The economic threat is grave. But even more serious are the social implications of these wasteful practices on our future generations.
As World War II ended, districts recognized heavy-duty military equipment could be utilized in the fields of America to protect and develop soil and water resources. In January 1946, district representatives met in Washington, D.C. to support legislation repurposing surplus equipment for use by districts. The proposed bill died before it could get out of committee, leading districts to realize they lost simply because they were in an unorganized group, speaking with many voices rather than one. Before they left Washington, D.C., Conservation District officials met to discuss the need for a national organization. On July 25, 1946, in Chicago, representatives from 17 states created the National Association of Soil Conservation District Governing Officials. In 1970, the name was shortened to the National Association of Conservation Districts. As districts faced challenges over the years, including learning emerging technology, surviving droughts, reorganizing district structures, and changing statute authorities and legislation, the National Association helped provide guidance and consistency to its member districts. With Conservation District's leadership, dedication, and locally led approach, landowners and communities have continued to improve their land productivity, water quality, wildlife habitat, and quality of life. The National Association became an integral resource to facilitate communication and growth of districts from coast to coast. NACD strived then, as it does today, to provide local conservation districts with a more powerful, unified national voice. Throughout the years, conservation districts have changed in structure. During their inception, conservation districts were led only by a governing board. Today, while those local boards still guide districts, the range of partners has grown dramatically. Most districts are co-located in service centers with conservation delivery partners like NRCS. Conservation districts develop partnerships to provide local, technical expertise to their communities' landowners, preserve the nation's forests, and assist customers with conservation planning, soil health initiatives, and education outreach and events. They serve as the local government in the federal, state, and local government conservation delivery system. The nation's nearly 3,000 conservation districts are at work in almost every county in the country and in U.S. territories such as Puerto Rico and Guam. As the nation's population continues to shift from rural communities to urban areas, conservation districts are hard at work creating urban conservation initiatives and engaging future conservation leaders while still addressing conservation needs across the forests, farms, and grasslands of the nation.
The conservation districts have been so phenomenal with everything that they've done for us. They actually were the ones who reached out to me. They said that they realized that this program was in existence, that they realized the importance of educating our youth about agriculture, and they wanted to be a part of that message of promoting agriculture with these students. Especially here in an urban setting. We're here in the heart of Nashville. Most of our students have never stepped foot on a farm, and so the local districts are aware of this, and so they wanted to do whatever they could to be able to get these kids involved in production ag.
Conservation districts continue to gain strength through grassroots advocacy, educating future generations, improving capacity for customer services, providing networking opportunities, and outreach to underserved communities. By focusing on a locally led model rather than regulations or enforcement, districts are able to help their fellow neighbors help their land and protect it, even when disaster strikes.
Recently, we had a wildfire in Dewey County where it consumed over half the county that totally burned. With 70-some structures, nearly 1,000 head of cattle in my area. 4 out of my 5 board members had great devastation themselves, but yet the district pulled together. Time of need, most of us didn't know what to do, but yet we knew we had to help everybody else. Other districts came in to help us as well. We donated hay, feed. Later on, fencing supplies were in a big need too. It's very important for a district to be there because the local interest in the people, they know everybody.
As conservation districts expand services and technical capacity, they also are expanding services demographically, reaching out to underserved or underrepresented populations. By always emphasizing the locally led model of conservation delivery, districts represent their increasingly diverse communities and help make all citizens' voices heard.
So you can take your local voice, combine it with so many other voices to become a such larger voice. For me, as a tribal person, it's been outstanding to see NACD reach out to the tribal conservation districts and to the tribal communities and tribal entities across the country.
Conservation districts have changed from primarily preserving farmland to providing expertise and guidance for all landscapes. We have been locally led from the beginning, and we continue that way today. The future of conservation districts is the future of our nation's natural resources. We are many communities and many landscapes with one mission and one voice.
The farmers and ranchers that are putting conservation on the ground is really almost immeasurable. They do so much that I don't think people even recognize or appreciate all that we're doing. We really need to be thinking about recruiting the young people to be involved in the conservation district movement, to be involved on the boards, but we have to empower them. We have to let them be involved. They have a lot of energy and talent, but to build them as leaders, we've got to bring them in and let them be those leaders.
As conservation districts look to the future, we must continue to expand our outreach, especially to the next generation. We must utilize new technology to make conservation data and guidance more accessible. We must provide resources to teachers and encourage younger generations to get involved. We must continue to promote soil health practices, help urban dwellers manage their landscapes, and provide leadership on natural resources and environmental issues.
There will always be new challenges, new administrations, new interpretations to the Farm Bill and other programs that we deal with. We work hard to adapt to those, work with our partners, and move forward with conservation work to put good conservation on the ground.
We are only going to be able to feed 9 billion people by the year 2050 if we do so in a way that is sustainable. That's why the work conservation districts do is so important. Districts are the lifeblood of what nourishes and sustains our country's natural resources. As we look to the future, districts are taking on new natural resource concerns across the country, and it will require everyone to be engaged to solve and address them. We must build on the proven success of today's conservation districts to ensure conservation delivery will be stronger now and in the future.
Okay, that provides a really good overview and history of why conservation districts came into existence and what they do. And that I'm pretty sure that nobody can argue that they have not been effective. There's relatively, you can look out on the landscape and see the impacts of conservation districts all throughout our state. In Montana, we have 58 conservation districts, and they cover most of the land in Montana. They're added to 3,000 conservation districts nationwide, so they have a really strong voice for local conservation. One of the things that video mentioned was Hugh Hammond Bennett and how he was instrumental in getting the Soil Conservation Service into being, but what it doesn't mention is M.L. Wilson, who happened to be a homesteader in Montana, later the first county agent in Montana, and then after that he served as the Secretary of Agriculture of USDA. And it was his brainchild to develop a structure whereby local citizens had the opportunity to provide local input into conservation. And you know, and it really is a mastermind. It was set up where one person in Petroleum County perhaps might be able to make a difference. They can make a difference locally, they can make a difference regionally, they can make a difference statewide or even nationwide. And while not all every supervisor is going to want to do that, it does provide a structure for conservation district supervisors and individuals within your communities to do that. The conservation districts are a little confusing, and it is kind of one of those things that over the years, it's one of those things that conservation district employees and boards get confused about. And no wonder. Conservation districts get money from the county, and they have the authority to tax, but they're not county. County provides services to the conservation districts, and they levy taxes and run elections at the direction of a conservation district board, but they don't really, they provide those services to you. They don't really dictate policy for you. Conservation districts are set up by law, and they follow state law, but you're not state. Most conservation districts are in federal offices and work hand in hand with the federal government, NRCA, Natural Resource Conservation Service, but they're not feds. They don't pay certain taxes, but conservation district boards are not a nonprofit. So exactly what are they? They're autonomous governmental subdivisions of the state, individually formed and under the complete direction of your conservation district board. The conservation districts through DNRC, they were set up in the law to provide certain services to conservation districts. And we have a staff of 7 that provide permitting coordination, water reservation assistance, general CD law assistance. We provide legal assistance, financial assistance, and really just general coordination of conservation district activities. And later we'll hear from the staff today. Carl wasn't able to make it today, and he was hoping to be able to be on to talk about conservation district law and what conservation districts do, but he had a family emergency, so he's not able to make it. So I'll just try to cover his part of this presentation. Conservation districts are set up by law under 7615-101 through 114, and that law covers everything that a conservation district has the authority to do. And basically, if it's not there, you don't have the authority to do it. I'd like to say that all of the resources that are provided to a conservation district are provided to you by the legislature. The legislature giveth and the legislature taketh away. So if you the NACD works really hard for you to try to make sure that the resources that you need are available when you need them. This book, The Laws Pertaining to Conservation Districts, tells a conservation district what authorities and roles that you have. If it's not in there, it doesn't exist. But generally, it sets up the tools and authority to help you get your job done. Conservation districts are governed by elected and appointed boards. They're not volunteers. Sometimes I hear people calling them volunteers, and they're not. But they do volunteer their time. So there's a big difference in distinction of that, because I think the law, once a supervisor takes office, they're taken off of office. That requires them to do certain duties, but they don't get paid for their time. And there's a big difference between showing up if you want to and doing what you want. So conservation districts are not volunteers. The conservation district supervisors are elected in the general election. The urban supervisors are appointed by the municipalities within your conservation district. And it's kind of a little bit convoluted about how, and you will always, if you have any municipalities within your conservation district boundaries, you will always have 2 urban supervisors. So the role of keeping track of who's up for election and getting people on the ballot is a role of the conservation district employee. The law covers finances of a conservation district, and it basically says that a conservation district can accept funding from any source. But all of the money that is collected by a conservation district is public, and how you spend it is open to the public. Everything you do is to be conducted in the open. And there's some pretty strict laws in Montana that talk about notice and providing information and participation for the public in conservation district business. It gives the conservation district supervisors taxing authority. Conservation districts can levy a small tax on real property to help get to support their operations, and in most cases that's not enough money, and grants are provided by DNRC to help with operational costs. Conservation districts have 5 different taxing authorities. One is the regular levy, and the other is a permissive levy, and those are the 2 that are mainly used. It's up to the conservation district to go through the forms and submit them to the county to make sure that they're levying the proper amount. So usually that will fall on the Conservation District employee. There are three other taxing authorities. One is a special administrative levy, and there are two conservation districts that use that. But what that allows a conservation district to do is increase your regular levy to help cover operational costs, but it requires a vote of the people. There's a special project levy if a conservation district is working in a particular area and has that for the benefit of particular people, you have the authority to develop a levy to help pay for that project. And then conservation districts can issue bonds to pay for projects and then use taxes to pay for those. Those last two, no conservation district has done to date that I know of. Conservation district planning is also outlined in this conservation district law. We'll get into that a little later, but conservation district employees really have a role in that, helping conservation district supervisors and boards kind of organize to make sure that they have the information they need so they can plan. There's some odd authorities in the conservation district law. Conservation districts can own and operate public works for irrigation, erosion control, flooding, fish and wildlife, recreation, or energy development. No conservation district that I know has done that. There was one that was pretty close to purchasing a reservoir, but ended up in the long run not doing that. But you do have the authority to be able to do that. Conservation districts can sell bonds to pay for conservation projects. They can adopt land use ordinances, and we have several conservation districts that have done those. One is one form of the ordinance is a bison grazing ordinance. One conservation district has an ordinance that talks about the placement of coal bed methane wells. And let's see, there was another ordinance that had to do with soil erosion for sod busting, and that one no longer exists. And then the Lewis and Clark CD had one that had to do with soil erosion and sedimentation for disturbed lands. And other laws ended up superseding that, so they repealed that. But it is kind of an interesting authority that conservation districts have. Conservation districts can levy a conservation practice loan program, and there are two conservation districts that do that. They can buy and sell property and they can receive income from it. The law also mentions about how you have your meetings, how your meetings have to be open, they have to be posted, your minutes have to have certain things in them, and that those also have to be available to the public. It tells you how you farm, it tells you how you change your boundaries, it tells you how you hire consultants. So if you don't have a copy of the law book, I would advise that you contact us and get one. We also have a copy of the law book on our website, but it is a pretty helpful guide. And one of the things Conservation Districts Bureau does is help translate that to English, because sometimes it's not all that clear about what it means. Okay, so how conservation districts take all of that and actually do some fun stuff, it's just sort of the background and the meat and potatoes, but conservation districts can do some really great things. Heidi Fleury with the Lake Conservation District is going to talk to you about how some of the ideas that they've done and what conservation districts can do.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Great to see you. I am just going to use this chance to transition into how conservation districts do all the things Lori was talking about. I think the simplest way to put how we do work is that we work within a network of local government services, watershed partners, and engaged citizens to access federal, state, and private conservation funding to do work in our local communities. So it's really a neat process, I think, that we work with the Conservation Districts bureaus to access their grant funding to do different projects. And I don't know if you want to just go to that next slide, Lori. And we access all of these partnerships and funding to address different natural resources concerns. And you can see what some of the important ones are on that slide. And that's it for me for now.
Okay, thank you, Heidi. Julie Goss is on to share with you some ideas about education and outreach programs that conservation districts do.
Okay, so we do several different education and outreach programs, a lot of youth stuff and adult stuff. The adult workshops, probably soil health, pollinator stuff, range workshops, ladies workshops, and most of our workshops and seminars or our education that we try to do is stuff that comes out of an idea that's formed through maybe the local working group or an issue that comes up that we want to make sure that people are aware of. And then our youth outreach that we do, a lot of times, a lot of districts do outdoor classrooms, pick on the smaller counties with less students, maybe do an outdoor classroom for the entire school, grade school. Our particular county, we do it for the 8th grade for everybody in the county. There's a picture here with the kids is a picture with the geologist from Montana Bureau of Mines, Kevin Chandler, and we have an awesome spot that we go to, and we bring in our partners, the Extension, NRCS, Fish, Wildlife and Parks, and anybody, the Research Center, anybody that we can get to come in and help us show kids different things about the natural resources. There's a lot of other statewide events. There's the range camps, range days, range tours, winter grazing seminars, soil health seminars. It's just, anything you can think of, you can figure out a way, and someone who will help you put on a workshop. And there's lots of different places and sources to get speaker ideas. People, lost my train of thought, but anyway, so there's just a lot of different education outreach programs that are out there that people have done, and the sky's the limit. So that's it for me.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Conservation districts care about their local communities, and Chris Evans is going to talk to you about some ways that they do that.
Good morning, everybody. So as you can see on the slide, we've got some river cleanup, seed giveaways, and local support activities that districts do. In addition, over the years, I know that we have and other districts have done fire response, flood response, weed pulls, collaboration with city and county issues, your county fairs, preparedness events, and just generally engaging with your local communities. This can lead to a far more effective planning for your district and for better engagement from landowners and other residents in your conservation districts. Pretty much the sky's the limit as long as it falls within your district mission and your board is supportive of the activities. Funding is available for a lot of different kinds of events. And if you have people come into your office, quite often we have people come into our office and want to do something specific, and it's turned into some really great projects over the years. So I encourage you to, assess what your board has already done, what your district has already done, and what the needs are in your communities.
Thank you, Chris. One of the major jobs that conservation districts have is stream permitting with 310 law, and conservation district's role in that is district employees' role in that is pretty important. Jason Garber works for the Conservation Districts Bureau, and he's our stream permitting coordinator, and he's going to talk to you just a little bit about that right now.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Jason Garber, and as Lori said, my primary role with the CD Bureau is to provide technical assistance to districts regarding stream permitting. And one of the unique things about conservation districts in Montana is that they have this regulatory role, this permitting role regarding projects that happen in perennial streams in Montana. There's very few districts around the country that have that kind of regulatory authority. And in Montana, for projects in waterways, there's basically 3 different levels of agencies that issue permits. And so at the most local level, you have the conservation districts, and then there are permits that get issued at the state level, and then the Army Corps of Engineers issues permits at the federal level. And so the districts, fill a really unique and very important role in that permitting scheme in Montana. And so this morning, I'm just going to talk very briefly, very high level, about the district's role in this permitting program. Just a history of the law. The Natural Streambed Land Preservation Act of 1975, also known as the 310 Law, went into effect in 1975. So it's been around for a long time. That's about the same time that the Clean Water Act was established, and that came about. The CD's process in relation to the 310 law, there's basically 4 different things that a conservation district looks at when they get an application. They determine the purpose of the project, they determine if the project is reasonable, they determine if they have jurisdiction over that project or not, and then they make a decision based on criteria in law and rule. One of the things I'll kind of just stay on for our purposes here is the law and the rules. So at the highest level, the law is the Natural Streambed and Land Preservation Act. And then the administrative rules of Montana are built off the law. And then the CD adopts regulations based off of the administrative rules of Montana. And those rules are basically the rubric or the way the 310 law is laid out. So that forms the process of how you make decisions on permitting actions. And every district in the state has rules that they've adopted. Those are based off of a DNRC, off a state template. They have to meet a minimum criteria. Those laws can be modified. They can actually be more rigorous than the template rules. But that's, if you look at your rules for 310, that's a good way to start to understand the role the CD plays in the permitting process and how that process plays out. It's all there in the rules. Like I said, there's a template for the rules. All CDs have their own rules. Occasionally, the rules may change based on legislation. So for example, recently in the last session, there was a rule change on some time periods that happened, and CDs had to adopt that change. So occasionally that needs to happen. I mean, there was a change in 2003 that came out of the legislature. There was one in 2019. Doesn't happen very often. If a district wants to amend their rules to make something more stringent, for example, they can do that at any time. There's a process for doing that, and I'm there to assist you in that process. Kind of on the administrative side of things with 310 permitting, there are forms that are used to everything from the application to forms you use throughout the process. The most updated versions of those forms are located on DNRC's website. We just changed some things on the Bureau website and updated all the forms on there. There's also some supplemental information that is very useful to you. I would suggest getting on there and checking that out. And then if you have questions, follow up with me in the phone call, and we can kind of walk through that stuff. In Montana, since there's so many different agencies that play around in the stream permitting world, there's what's called a joint application. That application, the format of that application is accepted by all agencies that deal in stream permitting, including floodplain permitting. And so that's a way to kind of streamline it for the regulated public, because they can fill out one application and then send that to each agency that needs it. And oftentimes, when they filled out that one application, they don't have to duplicate the process every time, because if we didn't have that, then the public would have to send in a different application to each agency. And so you'll get used to seeing those come in. I can talk, typically when we do so for 310, we do workshops throughout the state. And in those workshops, we can take the deep dive into this whole process. And a lot of times that's tailored to specific needs of districts. So I'm kind of not used to giving a 10-minute spiel that's so high level. The other thing I just want to touch on, there are time frames spelled out in your rules on how long the process takes to issue a permit, that type of thing. There's a nexus there that Chris may touch on here after I speak about Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks plays a role in 310 permitting. They're a team member, and they along with the board go on site visits and make decisions. They're there to help the board make decisions about projects, especially in light of aquatic resources like fish and aquatic insects and things like that. And so there's some key time periods to get information to them when you get an application in your door. Yeah, some of this stuff I'm really not going to get into that much. One thing I would say is that I'm a good resource, for you if you have questions about other agencies that do stream permitting. So I work a lot with the Army Corps and Montana DEQ and other districts. And so I can put you in touch with people if you're interested in that at any time during your process. There's one thing I did want to make sure that I talked about it's pretty important is there's a reporting component in that every year I'll send you a spreadsheet that's blank that is soliciting your numbers for 310 for that calendar year. And all you do is just fill that out, send it back to me, and I compile all those numbers. And it's important for a couple of different reasons. One is that we use those numbers to allocate admin grants to districts. So it's important to make sure that you get back with us with your numbers, and then we calculate how much money you would get based on the activity you're seeing in 310 world. And the other important reason is that, when legislative sessions roll around, if there's bills that affect 310, a legislative committee or a legislator or the public could ask questions, such as, well, how many permits are being issued in this MACD area and the like. And so if I have those numbers on hand, that's very helpful for that whole process. And so you'll see in December, there'll be an email from me soliciting those numbers. I give you 2 months, to get those back to us. But that's really important. And then one last thing I'd like to plug, and you'll see this in the next district notes that we send out. I have a write-up in there about this Montana stream permitting guide. And this is very handy guide that's been updated within the last year. It's been around for about 15 years, but it's very readable. It has tabs in here with the different subject matter marked. And it not only outlines the 310 law and the district's role in that, but it also goes through the other stream permits that are out there and the agencies that are involved with that, as well as like design considerations and things like that. And this can be really handy if you have an applicant come in and they don't understand the permitting process. You can take this out and go over this with them in person. There's an electronic version available on our website, but this is just a very handy, very readable, practical tool that when you're new, you can sit down and flip through there and actually learn quite a bit. So anyway, thanks for joining us this morning. You'll be hearing from me a lot. We'll be working together quite a bit. Never hesitate to give me a call or email, and I can get your questions answered. Thanks.
Thank you, Jason. Chris is going to talk about what this sort of means for a conservation district employee and your role in the administration of 310.
All right, I guess my first recommendation to people is organization. And I'm not the best at this sometimes, but your files for your 310 permit applications, complaints and emergencies are very important, particularly complaints in case they end up in court. Your scheduling of inspections can be a challenge when you're dealing with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. My district is unique to some that my board members do their inspections in the area that they are elected in. So I'm coordinating with a board member and Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, sometimes Army Corps, sometimes DEQ, and maybe sometimes the Forest Service or BOR. Follow the timelines. There are some cheat sheets that I've made up over the years on process with the timelines built into them, as well as a flow chart that I got somewhere, and I don't know where I got that from. So those, from the time you accept a permit to the time Fish, Wildlife, and Parks gets that to the time they have to let you know if they want to do an inspection, those are important details to follow. Keep good records, print your emails that you're getting about permits, make sure that they're in your files. I scan all of my permit applications, emergencies, and complaints. So I have a duplicate electronic file for each application, and work closely with your Fish, Wildlife, and Parks people. Whether you have one biologist or, like me, work with 5 different biologists, that relationship is an important one. They are advisory to your conservation district board. They don't make the decisions. They can go to arbitration about decisions that your board makes, but they do not make the decision for your board. But they are a good resource, and they have good ideas that sometimes the boards listen to, sometimes they don't. So work closely with them. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Chris. One thing that I'm not sure if Jason or Chris mentioned, but there's 2 forms that start the time frame ticking, or 2 ways to start the time frame ticking on the amount of time that a 310 has to be issued, and it has to do with the acceptance of a permit. So the conservation district has 2 different ways of being able to accept that permit. Some conservation districts bring all the permits to their board meeting, and the board accepts the permits and then sets up the inspections from there. But more conservation districts probably allow the conservation district employee to accept the permits, and when you accept them, you're just basically looking at them to determine whether it's an actual, project that falls within the jurisdiction of the CD, whether the application is complete. And, at any time, a district employee can bring it to their board. But if the district employee is the one that's able to accept the application, then it cuts out a whole month sometimes in the review. So if a district employee accepts the application, they can be inspected, and the board really actually will only see it once. They'll see it after it's been inspected. They'll hear the team inspection report and then make a decision at that time. So anyway, I'm not sure if that was spelled out, but that is an option for district employees to be able to accept applications. Okay. Dwayne Claypool is another Conservation District Bureau employee, and he provides assistance to conservation districts on water reservations.
Yes, so as Lori mentioned, I am Dwayne Claypool. I work out of the Miles City CD Bureau office, and the last 35 plus years I've worked with districts on their water reservations. So today I just want to give general, I've got about 5 minutes, just a general overview of the CD water reservations that districts have. So what water reservations are, just basic concepts, that they're blocks of water or water rights. They actually are water rights that the districts hold on behalf and for the purpose of producers in that district to use for irrigation. So that's the specific purpose, is they got those box water for future development of ag irrigation to allow producers to apply to use that for that purpose. So if you look at this first slide, it shows that the districts that have water reservations throughout the state, there's 32 districts in basically 3 different basins. 2 different basins in general, but we divide, well, actually, I guess you could say 4: upper, lower Yellowstone, upper Missouri, lower Missouri. So, and each of these districts has a manual that has forms, rules, policy, procedure that really guide how the district administers the water reservation. So, and the forms are obviously for use by the producer to apply for a portion of that water reservation to develop that ag irrigation. A little history is that the conservation districts were granted in the Yellowstone River Basin reservations first. The preceding that, the reason that they could even apply for reservations is that it was written into the 1973 Montana Water Use Act, kind of a watershed act in Montana that established old and new water rights. So in that law, allowed public entities like districts to apply for water reservations. So in the mid-70s, there was a large demand for water in the Yellowstone River Basin, so the reservation process was put into place. The 14 districts applied for water reservations in that basin. In 1978, all 14 districts were granted the water reservations, along with some other entities like DFWP, some cities, so forth. But the districts were granted the water specifically for ag irrigation development. So then in 1992, the upper Missouri, more districts were granted water reservations. And then 1994, more districts were granted water reservations in the lower and little Missouri. So that's kind of the history in general of the water reservations and how districts got into the water reservation business. So if we go to the next slide, there you go. What this shows is the role that the CD administrator and the CD Bureau staff, like myself, play in administration of the water reservation. Because it is water right that needs to be administered in the application of, in general, the CD administrator's role is to receive all applications, transfers, basically any form or any document that deals with the water reservation, and then process them. And in that, basically in that act of processing, typically I get a copy of them, and if there's questions, I'll work with the CD administrator to process the application, to answer questions, to gather other information, and then in general also levy fees, maintain district records. So really in general, perform all administrative actions needed to administer the water reservation. So then the CDB, the Conservation District Bureau staff, myself's role, and Ann Kolzak, as you saw, she's out of Glasgow on that last slide. We assist district really basically in all administrative and technical issues and processing regarding the water reservations. And a big part of that is act as a liaison between the applicant or the producer and the district to help the applicant get all their information together, such as maps, design, soils, and then present that to the district, and then assist the district in their processing, such as doing a legal notice on the application, and then ultimately with the board to make a decision whether to grant a reserve water use authorization or not. So that's a big part of it. And then on the back end of that, we work to submit all the necessary documents, Helena, for final approval or for record keeping and so forth. So just in summary, there's the water reservations are blocks of water that the districts hold for individuals to use for ag irrigation, to apply to use. There's 32 districts in Montana that have water reservations. And then last, there's a role that the administrator plays and that the CD Bureau staff play to assist them. And just in closing, kind of a fact is that there's been to date about 60,000, that's 60,000 acres of ag irrigation that have taken place using the district's water reservations. So it's a great benefit to the local districts and also to the state of Montana. So with that, that's it.
Thank you, Dwayne. Linda Brander is, one thing I wanted to say about the water reservation program is that we just hired a new person to help Dwayne. His name is Randall Hopkins, and he'll be starting in Miles City October 19th. So we're really excited that he is on board with us, and I think you guys are going to really like him. Linda Brander is our grant manager, and the other thing that she does for Conservation Districts Bureau, and she's really good at it, is PR, public relations and marketing. But for today, she is going to talk to you about some of the financial opportunities that you have through DNRC.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. And the first thing I want to do is make a correction on my graphic. This is a graphic that's been run by my brain many times, and I overlooked it till this morning. The total for all of these programs is $260,000 per fiscal year. So this $260,000 funds the 223 grants, the mini ed grants, and the district development. And as you'll see then, we allotted $7,500 for mini grants and then the $50 for district development. And this money comes from revenues from the interest on the coal tax fund and some general fund revenues. And earlier before this, it used to be a higher number, but over the last couple of years, it's decreased because coal production has decreased. So this year, this is what we have to work with. It's $260,000. The 223 grant is managed and reviewed and ranked and awarded by our Resource Conservation Advisory Council, what we call RCAC. And this council is 7 members. They are appointed by the governor, and all except for one, which is Kathleen Johnson. She just came on this year. All of these members have been on this board for at least 5 years, and each of these members serve a time slot of 2 years. And so we just re-upped them all, and they all agreed to re-up. They're very dedicated individuals. And I just want to assure you guys, when you're making presentations to these folks, these are folks that are kind, open, and really want to help conservation districts. So when you're getting ready to make a presentation, I want you to think of them as that. Next slide, please. So the 223 program, I want to give you an overview, and this is just the 223 I'm going to talk about with this slide. You can apply for projects up to $20,000, ground projects, ground reservation, education, feasibility studies, etc., demonstrations, farm equipment, etc. And you can apply for up to $20,000 more than the $20,000 limit, but you must have a 50-50 cash match. Now, irrigation projects, we've done liners for irrigation districts, etc., that will require a 50-50 cash match. And if, for example, you have landowners that want to donate their equipment and time to make up that match, that won't work. It has to be cash. And one other thing I want to mention on this cash match, if any of you are going forward to do a community garden and you want a sprinkler system put in, that sprinkler system falls under the category of requiring a 50-50 cash match. So just be aware of that. And education projects, we allot up to $10,000. And I want to let you know on many of these projects, like a demonstration project or a feasibility study, These can go for up to 3 to 5 years because you're doing a demonstration and you're testing soil for a period of 3 to 5 years. So you can have up to 5 years on these projects. Most of them can be completed with 1 or 2 years, and so we work it like that. And then on the equipment, we have funded many no-till drills, some mesh, things that lay out mesh. Anytime you're applying for an equipment grant, you must apply or supply a rental agreement. And I was just thinking, we don't have one on our website, but I'm going to put a rental agreement on our website. And I believe it was developed by Lake County that gives you a template for what you need to include in that thing. And the rental agreement basically defines what you need to do to charge out per acre, where every time the drill goes out, and it's used to be paid for maintenance of this equipment, particularly the no-till drill. And if you go after a no-till drill, it's only a one-time funding thing. So if you get funded, you need to be aware that you need to be building up your own cash fund now to replace that equipment 5 years or more down the road. I think, and then one of the things I want to mention on these projects, and this is what the council, the RCA council, really, really strongly looks at when you are supplying your applications. They want to have partners indicated on there, and they want to have in-kinds expressed. So if you have folks providing in-kind contributions, calculate that time out and list it. Or if you have somebody sponsoring the facility rental or the food, make sure you list that amount because they really scrutinize that. And I also want to mention that on all of our programs, grant programs, you cannot use any of this money for food. And later on down the road, like with mini grants, you can't use it to pay for gloves, shovels, garbage bags, anything that can be provided by the parents or the folks or the districts themselves. Next slide, please. Oh, one before you leave. Weeds. The weed, we have lots of people apply, or lots of districts applying for weed grants, and it's really a tough area because when you're applying for a weed grant, you must first indicate that you have gone to the Montana Noxious Weed Trust Fund, that you've applied to them, and either they said yay, yes, you get it, or nay. And so we just need, the council needs some sort of documented source that you've applied for that. Now this where it takes a little bit of thinking and planning on your board's behalf, because the weed, Montana Noxious Weed Fund only funds grants once a year, and their deadline is, I believe, January 6th of 2021. So you need to kind of look at, if you've got a major weed project you're going to do, look at getting that in the hopper now and having it go into the Montana Noxious Weed Trust Fund to see what they're going to say. The only time we alter that rule is with the mini grants. And with the mini grants, we won't fund big weed mitigation projects, we won't fund chemicals, but we will fund education, or we've funded weed pull programs where students come and do weed pulls in different areas. So the mini grant will fund weed projects basically in the form of education or like the mitigation with pulling. Okay, the next slide. On the next slide, we're going to be looking at the other grants. And so the other grants that we want to talk about is the District Development Grant. This is for up to $10,000. And this grant has been kind of hazy in the past, but this grant, if you're applying for it, it must end in some type of outcome. It can't be funded just to fund operational or staff salary expenses, but it can fund salary expenses if you are looking at writing a grant to bring in more money, or if you're looking at getting a new grow program launched, like a carcass removal program, or you're looking at getting a feasibility study started, and it's up to $10,000. And I want to talk a little bit about the mini ed grants. The mini ed grants we've been getting a lot of schools in now, and they must come through you, or anybody must come through you, the CD district, to implement one of these. And for example, the weed pull project was out of Cascade school, this Great Falls school system, and they worked through, and they were pulling in Lewis and Clark County. So they worked with Chris Evans to set up their grant. And one of the things is that if you're working with anybody that wants to come in and submit a mini grant, help them understand that the grant must be approved by your board and when the timeline of your meetings are, so they coincide with making sure that outside organizations can meet the timeline of our grant system. And those can be up to 500, minimum of 100. And for districts that are not as financially stable, we will be able to fund salary for the CD district administrator. And one of the things I want to encourage you, all of the new district administrators, this is the place where I encourage you to see if you can work with your community and your board to find a project, because it's a project that can be done and can basically be all yours. You can write the grant, and if you're going to do a school program like or conservation in the parks, touring, taking kids to a ranch, targeting to third graders or something to do anything, it's something that really can develop ownership for you to become involved in the district, and it's practice for writing the larger 223 grants. And for all of my grants, I'm not going to talk about the pollinator, but all of these grants, the 223, the district development, and the mini grants, they all have deadlines, and they are on our website right now. But the deadlines every year will be mid-July, mid-October, mid-January, mid-April. And for you to think about this is that plan ahead, because if you want a project to be implemented, it can't be implemented after you get the award very quickly, because our grants, once you're awarded, it must go through, we set up your grant agreements, and they go through our internal review, and that can take, after you win, it could be up to 3 or 4 weeks after you win to be ready to launch your program. So it's something that I tell districts, and to plan ahead if you've got, say, a weed project going on or something next year. Excuse me, not a weed project, but a on-the-ground dirt project. The pollinator grants, I just want to back to, the mini grants are reviewed by me, and if I have questions, Lori helps me out. Those grants can be turned around rather quickly, and they're not as arduous in review as the RCA grants. With the pollinator grants, this is a grant program run by Mary, and you can apply for a minimum and go up to $20,000. And it's for pollinator-related projects. And once again, this is on a first-come, first-served basis. There's no deadlines. When the money's gone, the money's gone. And it is reviewed by Mary, and sometimes Lori backs her up. So that program and plus the mini are much quicker turnarounds for you. And the review process is probably less arduous than the 223 and the. So I think that's my part. And I just want to let each of you know, whether you want to start writing a mini grant or any of the grants, I'm always available to act as a coach, as are other staff members, because I don't vote on the 223s. So I'm really happy to help you, to give you tips, what I've seen before, what you might need to address in there. And one of the things that's really important in the 223s, it must be strongly demonstrated that's a conservation related grant and really produce strong partnerships. So those are two things that you must emphasize when you write a grant for the 223 or the district development. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. I wanted to share with you a story that from a conversation that I had with a supervisor from Valley CD. I think a lot of you know him, Jeff Pattison. And I was talking to him the other day, and he said for the longest time their conservation district didn't feel like they could do anything because they didn't have any money. And he said, basically he used this analogy. He said, we were starving and we didn't know that you had a refrigerator full of food, and all we had to do is open the door and get some. So that is basically what we're trying to accomplish today, is to let you know that we do have funding, and it's specifically geared toward conservation districts. And a lot of times if we don't have the funding specifically for what you're trying to do, we keep it kind of in the back of our minds, and then when opportunities arise, we will try to go after funding that helps conservation districts with their projects. So, you know, communication with us about your needs is really important, and it eventually will lead to funding for your projects. So the next segment of our workshop is has to do with the roles and responsibilities of a conservation district administrator. And as you're hearing, I'm sure you're thinking that there are a lot. We hope not to scare you too badly, but the employees organization is going to take it from here.
Okay, I think that's me.
It is you.
Heidi back again here. I was feeling a little nervous earlier that this is gonna go on, and I think we're doing a good job. So I'm less nervous.
We'd never go on and on, Heidi.
So I'm gonna start with the roles and responsibilities for the office and staff. I don't know if you can go to the next slide, Lori.
Oh, Mary's handling that.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mary. So office and staff management and just conservation district management it can seem a little overwhelming because not only are you the office manager, you're the HR person, you're tech support, you're also the bookkeeper, you're also the main contact for every one of the supervisors and any employees that you might have as well. And so a lot of offices throughout the state don't have a ton of employees, and they don't even have full-time staff, which is something I hope we're all working towards, is to get full-time staff in all the conservation districts. But there are a couple of things that are important about your office hours, and I think that everything has obviously changed during these COVID times, and administrators making sure that you have the right equipment to have a good at-home office is really important right now. And there are a lot of different funding mechanisms that will help you get a new computer right now, or headphones so you can do virtual meetings easier. So there are a lot of different office supplies that maybe you don't have right now, or maybe you just have access to an NRCS computer and you haven't even gotten your link pass and it's been 6 weeks, which is literally one of the most frustrating things for every conservation district who has to be on the NRCS system. It's nice because you get free tech support, but it's just tough because you have to have that link pass and it takes a really long time to get one. And so you get in the office and you're ready to do things and you don't even have an email or a computer you can log on to. And so I hope that every CD out there is really working to at least have their own computer, because you don't want to have QuickBooks on the government computer anyway. So having your own computer is really important, and having internet connection to that computer is also important. And I know that there are a lot of districts that don't have funding for those things in their operating budget, but through the grants from DNRC, and then also through this additional business adaptability funding for COVID, I feel like now's the time for us to really get our office equipment together. I have a computer from like 2010. It's this desktop thing that I've been carrying around with me, and it's really clunky and it's terrible. And I'm sure that everybody, there are a lot of conservation districts out there who don't have that up-to-date equipment. So right now, I think that's really important for office management. There's also the opportunity for people who are working from home. My conservation district gives me a phone stipend. So they give me a certain amount of money every month, so I have my cell phone available. And so if you are using your phone, again, right now is a time where you can get reimbursed for those things very easily. And if anybody needs any help with those grants, the Montana Association of Conservation Districts is helping people, but I've been working on my own, and I'm sure other people have been. So there's kind of the technology part of office. There's maintaining consistent office hours, at this point, I think that that's kind of tough. And so, you know, making sure that you definitely have a day that you're there where you're checking all your voicemails and you're responding to everybody. But a lot of the things that you are going to be doing, you can do them remotely if you need to. Or you can, you know, if your district is giving you a stipend for your phone, you can even have your email on your phone so you can deal with it if you want. You don't have to do that, of course. So that's kind of the office manager part of it. There's staff. And so if you have staff, you're scheduling what time they're supposed to be there. You're doing all their HR stuff. You're onboarding them. You're helping out with everything. And then the supervisors, again, you can see from this slide, you maintain correspondence and communication with the supervisors. And you also just really make sure that they are helping you make decisions and that you're not feeling lost and making decisions and being like, oh, I don't know if this is the right thing to do. Hopefully, all of you have supervisors that are supporting you if you're a new employee, and they help you figure out how to navigate all the questions that will come up. Because as I've been with the Conservation District here in Lake County for about 5 years, and it has been really difficult to learn everything and to remember everything. And so having the support of your supervisors and really making sure you have good communication with them and you're not afraid to call them when you have a problem. That's something that I think is also very important. Let's see, do any other administrators have anything that they'd like to say about office management? Okay, yeah, we can move on.
Hey, thank you, Heidi. Okay, the next section is on monthly board meetings and how those, what the Conservation District employees' roles are in board meetings, and Chris Evans will be talking to you about that.
Okay. Yeah, this is Chris. I thought financial management was next. Sorry.
Oh, did I skip it?
That's okay. We can go back. So for the monthly board meetings, I was just doing some on the side calculations here, and I've worked for the district for over 21 years now, and that's roughly 250 board meetings or so. So I've done a few of these. They can be intimidating at first. I remember my first board meeting, I recorded it and I tried to take minutes on the laptop, and it went okay. And that's how I take minutes, is on the laptop. Just a quick reminder though, all board meetings are open to the public. They have to be publicly noticed. And I was conferring with Lori on this because there's two kinds of public notice that we give for meetings. There's public hearings for like you're changing your 310 rules, where you have to legally notice 2 weeks in advance and 4 weeks in advance of the meeting. But board meetings are a little bit different. They are considered, quote, due notice under the rules. And usually, no, excuse me, that's reasonable notice. And so usually board meetings are noticed, you know, within a week or so of the meeting. I think every district is probably a little bit different on that. In the times of coronavirus, we have started noticing our meetings 2 weeks in advance, and then I republish the notice on our website with any changes as we get closer. I just want to make very clear to people that the meeting is virtual, since our meetings are virtual right now. So that's it. Reasonable notice is not really defined, so it's sort of up to your board. I don't tend to notice anything any shorter than 48 hours ahead of the board meeting. So notice is important. We don't put our notice in the newspaper anymore for a lot of reasons. I notice it on our website, on our Facebook page. You can notice in the newspaper. I have an email list that I send meeting notices to. And then you need to take notices or take minutes at the board meeting. The minutes, everybody has a little bit different style. You want to capture who's there. You want to capture any pertinent comments on issues that are happening, motions and seconds on anything official, and then discussion that's pertinent to the issue. Once your previous month's minutes have been approved at that board meeting, then a copy needs to be sent to your county clerk and recorder to be certified, and a copy needs to be sent to the DNRC for their records. You know, there's a lot of weird stuff. Board meetings can be, when we're meeting in person, we have 3 of our board meetings a year in other parts of the county. We like to take them to the locals, and it's interesting. Sometimes we don't have any locals at our remote board meetings. Sometimes we have a lot of company. And our first meeting back in Helena, typically the room is full. Somebody just came up on chat and said something about the chair running the meeting. Yes, your chairman is supposed to run the meeting. The vice chair can run the meeting if the chair is not available. The districts run under Sturgis rules, not Robert's rules of parliamentary procedure. So that's something to keep in mind. Just make sure that your meetings are official, that there's not a lot of side chatter. I know when you're new, that's hard to say, hey, to your chairman, hey, you know, let's move along, or maybe we're getting off track here, but that's kind of an important thing to be able to do as an administrator. Your job as the administrator is to prepare a packet for the board members so that they know what's going on at the board meeting. You need to have, you know, 310s available. You need to have correspondence available for them to review. So however your board meetings are laid out, that's how you're supposed to follow it. So that's what I've got.
Thank you, Chris. One of the best examples, I think, of a difference that a conservation district employee can make came from a conservation district that had an employee that did everything for the conservation district board. I mean, everything. He didn't have to do anything. This board was actually run by the Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and the conservation district supervisors were just kind of sitting there and really not really knowing what their roles were, not really very involved. Well, the person that left that did everything for the conservation district board was replaced by a new person who didn't know any better, and she had some questions that she needed some involvement from the board. So she asked them a question about, hey, we have to have this meeting and we need to do a tour. Do you guys have any ideas? And the board really wasn't used to being able to have a whole lot of input, so they didn't do anything. And she sat there until it got uncomfortably quiet. And then pretty soon the supervisors were looking at their shoes, and then they were shuffling around. And then pretty soon, you know, one raised their hand and said, okay, I'll do this and I'll take care of that. And then another one said, hey, how about this? And then I would say 6 months down the road, that conservation district board was a completely different board. The Fish, Wildlife, and Parks no longer ran it. In fact, one of the supervisors jumped up and took the marker away from them and started writing on the board. And so it was just something even so simple as to allow them enough time to participate is a really good role that a conservation district employee can take. So I think I skipped the financial part. And so Chris, were you going to handle that one too?
Nope, Julie's going to do that one.
Okay, all right, Julie Goss, Richland TV.
Okay, there's a lot in the financial. The more I'm sitting here, the more I'm thinking how much there is. So I think I'm just going to touch on a little bit, and I'm pretty sure that this is going to be a webinar of its own someday. So I'm going to leave it at that. You know, we have our funding sources are like the mill levy money that we get from the county, admin grants that come from DNRC, other grants that we may use for projects and different things we have going. And then we also, some districts have services or where they sell trees, they rent equipment, different things that they may do for the public. So that we call, when we have, so if we have bills that we probably have to pay every month. Those need to be paid, approved at a board meeting. And then when we get into employee, and if you have a district where you're doing the payroll, you'd have to, keep your time sheets. And then you have to figure your payroll. If you don't use QuickBooks and you use another form of a payroll program, or if you just look at figure it out for yourself, you have to keep really good track of those deductions that you make for a payroll. And so those deductions need to be paid to different agencies. So if you have federal withholding, Social Security, Medicare, those are all paid to the IRS, and they need to be paid monthly before the 15th, and that needs to be done online. So if you haven't been set up into with the passwords and everything, you need to find out what those are. Some districts use an accountant to do that, and so you don't, you're not responsible for any of that. So if that's what your district does, then this part doesn't make, you don't need to be worry about this part. There also deduction is federal withholding. That needs to be, state withholding. That needs to be paid to the state of Montana, also online, and it's a monthly payment too, but then you reconcile it at the end of the year. There's quarterly, there's a report to send to the federal government on your withholdings that you've paid in. That's called a 941. We have unemployment to the state of Montana that's paid quarterly, and they don't send these forms out to you anymore, so you kind of have to go to the website. I believe you use ePass. I should have looked this up. I didn't thought of it. ePass, Montana TAP, the tax Department of Revenue, tax paying portion for withholding, and then the IRS site for the federal stuff. Like I said, this is a whole nother webinar all of its own. There's annually you do W-2s, so you have to reconcile all your payroll and send out the W-2s to your employees if you have them, or to yourself. 1099s for anybody that's makes over $600 in a pay period. That's non-employee compensation. And we have the Department of Administration report that is due every year. And if you're on a fiscal year, it would be due December 31st. And those forms are also not sent out to you. You have to go find them at the Department of Administration. So reach out to somebody if you can't find it, and we will help you. And then if you're on a yearly basis, those would be due in June 30th, I believe. So then we go back to our paying our bills, and we have to, we pay our bills. We make sure they're approved by our the board at the board meeting. Then we reconcile the checkbook every month. The checkbooks, that could be varied how that's handled. Some districts have the bank statement sent to the treasurer, and the treasurer and the administrator get together and reconcile it, or at least the treasurer signs off on it. Your check register can either be manually or computer generated, but you need to have one. A lot of districts use QuickBooks, so there's people out there that can help you with QuickBooks questions if you need help with those. Then there's every year you should do an audit. Like it can be internal audit, just the supervisors can just do it. If you don't, or you can have, if you have a lot of big grants and have a lot of things going on, you might have to do have an accounting firm do an audit for you. Just trying to think. Make sure you identify your voided checks. Don't just throw them away. Just keep them in your file. I keep a file for every all of my bills, and then I have the check stub attached to the bill, mark, when it was paid, and I keep my voided checks too, so that they know that it was a voided check. I think if there's any questions. The admin grant is usually, Carl sends that out. You need to have a budget and figure out what you're short, and he sends out a form for that. And it's usually, I think, about March or April, late March, early April, and it's usually due by May. So they like to, Lori can help us out on that, how much they want to make sure that you have enough money to operate your district. So if your mill levy is small, they will, they'll try to help us out with that administrative grant. The mill levy in July but for sure in August, the Department of Revenue should give you a form telling you what your value of the mill is. And then there's another form to fill out that is on the local business, Department of Administration, local government site. And that helps you to decide how much mill levy you want to ask the county commissioners for. That's kind of a short and sweet version of like a lot of the financial things that we go through. I didn't talk about public employment retirement. I don't do that at my, I know Chris does. So if you have any questions about that, I'll let her answer those. But
yeah, I can briefly talk about PERS. If your district is one that participates in the Montana Public Employees Retirement, there's a percentage that the district pays. There's a percentage that you pay out of your gross paycheck. You report online. They've got it's not really new anymore, but it's an online reporting system that is pretty much a pain in the neck sometimes because we're typically not big enough to upload a file for our employees. So we have to do manual reporting, which is kind of a hassle. But, I'm always happy to answer questions if I can about stuff like that. So yeah, PERS it's different. So.
This is Mary. I just wanted to caution that if you are a new employee and you are coming into a district that has PERS, that there is no grace period. If you don't start submitting that right away, there is a penalty. You can sometimes work with them and they might not fine you, but if you do have PERS, I would suggest contacting them right away and just making sure that you're on schedule.
Yeah, this is Chris again. That's a steep penalty. If I recall correctly, it's no less than $10 per day. And then it's a percentage. So whichever is bigger is what they'll fine you. So it's not insignificant.
Okay.
Oh, I forgot two things on my list. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
This is Julie again. I forgot about the insurance. That usually is we have liability insurance the districts carry, and that's usually somebody sends you a bill. It could come from an insurance company, local insurance company, or there's a group of people in another that use, but it's all through Montana Association of Counties, I believe, or most of them are anyway. And the other thing was state fund, which would be workman's comp, and they usually send you a bill also. And sometimes they do audits and you have to send them forms and stuff, but they're easy to get along with. They're not scary. So, but those two things are other things that we also have to deal with.
Okay, thank you. So we're running a little behind schedule, but we have annual planning, which is a really important part of Conservation District business and helping Conservation District employees understand how to meet the goals of their board. And Heidi Fleury will be speaking about that.
I'll go quick, Lori. So each year and we changed the time frame we do it. We do our annual plan in May to plan for our next year's budget, which is due in July, right? So on our annual plan, we talk about the projects and outreach and services that we would like to give to our conservation district for that year. And this is kind of the most fun part. You know, you guys heard that your office managers, your HR, your bookkeepers, you're the payroll specialists, your grant writers, your grant managers, partnership coordinators. You know, there are all sorts of different things that you're doing, but on the ground projects are probably the most fulfilling for all the people involved if they go well. And this is a project that you're looking at here, these photos. This is a project that went really well for Lake County Conservation District. And we had a member of the public contact us about a county park that had a highly degraded bank. And it was one of the only public access points on the Swan River. And the neighbor was really concerned about how that county park looked. And so we went to the park board and we talked to the commissioners about this park, and they had been trying to do something about it for about 10 years. And I was a brand new administrator when this neighbor to the park called and was like, hey, something needs to happen with this park. And I, thinking that I was really helping, was like, yeah, something does need to happen. And so we started this whole process, and you can see that we started a restoration project in 2016 and we completed it in 2019. So these projects, even if they're on your annual plan just for 1 year, sometimes they can end up taking several more years than you're expecting. So making sure that you're planning ahead with funding for a project that's going to be multi-year is really important. And that's just another part of your annual plan, right? And you, on your annual plan, you take in what the supervisors think, what your local working group has identified as some key things they would like to see in the community. And then you go from there and you have fun and you make projects and you get grant funding. Done.
That is very excellent, because it's in a nutshell, that's how you do it. A problem, solution, right? And then you look for solutions. Chris?
All right, so I'll be quick. Annual planning is a big part of what we do at Lewis and Clark. We completely revamped our annual plan several years ago. We look at our annual plan in November, December every year because our calendar fiscal year is January 1. And that's another thing about districts is it seems like there's a lot of variation in what your fiscal years are. So projects, like Heidi said, projects often stem from good conservation district planning. It also stems from people walking in your door or making a phone call and saying, hey, I've got a problem. Long range plans versus annual plans of operation. We used to have a long range plan. We now use an APO. In our APO, we tie our planning to our annual budget every year. So each item in the annual plan ties back to a line item in the budget, which is important in my opinion. It's important to plan because you have a limited budget. You need to know what the grants, what grants you need to go for. So your planning process helps you determine what grants you need to apply for and when. Good planning also provides a really important way for supervisors to buy into their conservation district, especially if they're new to your board. One way to get them more active in your board is to have them have a pet project that they want the district to get involved in, and that changes the sort of the flavor of every district a little bit. New board members can bring a lot, and the picture on the right there is one of our current projects. It's still in the works. It's an area of the county that experienced pretty severe flooding 2 years in a row. The little red dots are individual landowner priority sites that were determined by an assessment that we helped pay for through a grant and some of our own funding. So this one is ongoing, and we're pretty excited about where it could go. But that's the basic stuff, though. I mean, we're looking actually at turning our annual plan back into, or having a long-range plan to identify our longer-term goals. But the annual plan is an important one.
Thank you. Here again, it's pretty simply put. You have a problem and you develop a solution and you start working on it. And I appreciate the efforts that you guys are making. So we're going to switch gears here a little bit, and we're going to turn this over to our partners. We have some of the main partners that work with conservation districts: NRCS, the Montana Association of Conservation Districts, MECD, the employee organization, and some of the other the committees from MECD. So today we're going to start off with NRCS, and I believe Kyle Tackett is on the phone today to talk about their partnership with conservation districts.
All right, good morning, Lori. Can you hear me all right?
Sure can.
All right, just a little introduction. My name's Kyle Tackett. I'm a partnership liaison with the NRCS. I do work out of Dillon. I'm just down the hall from the Beaverhead Conservation District. I was a district conservationist in that office for about 10 years prior to the job I'm currently in. So Tom Watson, our state conservationist, wanted to be here today, but he's in North Dakota. I'm on another another task, so I offered to fill in. And thanks for real quick to Mary for working on slides. That helped a lot. So let's go to the next slide. I do just want to cover briefly, you know, what we do, a little bit about our structure. NRCS, and just to make sure everybody's on the same page, we are an agency under the Department of Agriculture, USDA. Our funding comes from what's commonly known as the Farm Bill. It has different titles, but every about 5 years they do a new Farm Bill. That's where our funding comes from. We are a private lands conservation agency, and we do offer financial and technical assistance to landowners. There doesn't always have to be dollars attached to what we do. We do like to get out and just provide that technical assistance. And I think it's important to highlight that it's purely voluntary. It is not regulatory. We work with landowners and folks renting land on a voluntary basis only. And we do succeed with our partnerships, and this partnership with conservation districts is one of the most important ones we have. What are some other things NRCS does? We are involved in snow survey. If you're familiar with the SNOTEL sites that are online, that comes from NRCS. And then also in the Bridger Plant Materials Center, also there. All right, next slide. Just to give you a little idea of how we're broke up, the green dots are where our field offices are. And I don't really want to focus on that, but I do want to give you a little idea of our structure here in Montana, especially for the new CD employees. We have 4 areas: Missoula area, Bozeman area, Great Falls, and Miles City. And it's broke up as you see on this map here. And that's important as we move forward a little bit in communication with NRCS and how we're structured, and hopefully that'll help you if you have any issues or concerns in your office. We have an office in about every county. A couple we don't have an office, but we are, like districts, spread out pretty good. Next slide. All right, and I do want to take a minute, and I know this is boring and there's a lot going on here, but I think it's important for those new CD employees to see this, a little bit about how we're structured. So Tom Watson's our state conservationist, and he sits in Bozeman. And then directly underneath him, he has what's called an assistant state conservationist for field operations. And like we saw on the previous slide, that's Missoula, Bozeman, Great Falls, and Miles City. So in Missoula, we have Mindy, Carrie Bilbo in Bozeman, Carrie Osberg in Great Falls, and Terry Heck in Miles City. So if you fall in one of those areas, please take note of who that person is. They supervise that area. They work directly under Tom. and then they supervise those district conservationists. They are who we need to be getting a hold of, who you need to be getting a hold of in conjunction with your district conservationists if you have any issues or challenges, and really keeping them in the loop. And then beneath the ACs, as they're often called, is our supervisory district conservationists, and I have those offices listed there where they're located. And then beneath there is our field office employees. It could be soil conservationists, range cons, technicians, and other folks like that. So this is a little bit generalized, and I left some folks off out of the state office. But I think it's important for you to be able to see at least how we're structured and how that structure applies to conservation. Next slide, please. So as we saw in the video, we do share a very rich history going back decades and decades. This partnership is very important. We often talk about the three-legged stools. We talk NRCS, DNRC, and districts, and how important it is in Montana and in the conservation work we do that we have that strong partnership. As was mentioned earlier, most of the offices that districts sit in are leased by us, and we pay the rent in most of those. Some districts have their own space. So we do provide office space, may provide vehicles in some situations. As Heidi mentioned, computers are an option as well. One thing I think it's important as we look at office space to always keep in mind is we provide one seat for the district to start with. Depending on the office we're in, some districts want to hire employees, which is great, but it's always important, don't assume the space is available just because an empty desk is there. So I just want to take a moment to talk a little bit about space, and if you have a space need, please communicate with your district conservationist and then that AC, talk about space. Just because the desk is vacant doesn't mean it's available. We could have somebody coming who could be sitting on it because we're about to advertise. It's just something we try to talk about every chance we get, because it can get really awkward if districts want to hire another employee or a Big Sky Watershed Corps member and think the space is there, but it's really not. And we are willing to work, we just need to communicate about it. So I think I'll stop on that. I just want to highlight the need for strong communication as we work through office space, vehicles, computers, things like that. Heidi was exactly right. Getting a link pass has advantages because it does give you access to our printers and to some of the things that make maybe your job a little easier, but it can be a challenge. Our hoops to jump through, and we'll do our best to help you through that. Next slide. So what do districts, how do they assist NRCS? Districts are a huge partner in our outreach, community education events, advocating for natural resource programs. And one of the biggest things that they really help us with is chairing a local working group. And a local working group is really what it is. It's a group of local participants or producers or citizens in the county coming together to talk about the resource concerns in that area. And CDs are asked to chair that local working group. It's a big task, a lot of communication, a lot of outreach, meeting notices, but it's just a great partnership we have so that our local citizens have a voice in what the resource concerns are that NRCS is looking at addressing. And then also recommending natural resource priorities and the criteria for NRCS. So that's a big ask. So let's move on to the next slide and talk a little bit about how that moves forward into what we do. In Montana, we've transitioned into what we call Montana Focused Conservation. And EQIP is our flagship financial program for NRCS. It's Environmental Quality Incentives Program. Montana Focused Conservation, MFC, we got to have an acronym in there, is how we're delivering it in Montana. Next slide, please. And so the decision was made 2 years ago that we were going to start delivering that funding a little differently. And that where that money goes and the resource concerns that we're going to address are best identified locally, not by Tom and his state office in Bozeman, but locally. So we're looking at targeting our investments where we can move the needle, have the highest impact through the locally led process, where that local working group helps us identify priorities. Next slide, please. So just the highlights of MFC. It's locally led, it's partner-centric, focused, results-oriented. We're really trying to move the needle on a resource issue that's identified by our local producers, our local citizens, our DCs. Ultimately, our DCs take that advice and then write a long-range plan. And they have to be the arbitrator of advice. You know, the easy example we use is we're not going to save the whales here in Montana. So let's talk about the resource concerns that we have the ability to have an impact on here in Montana, in our county, in our watershed. And they put together a long-range plan. And it is great if the district's long-range plan aligns with ours, is coordinated. But at the end of the day, our folks are asked to have a long-range plan. Whether or not it aligns exactly with the timing and where districts are on their long-range plan. I know Chris mentioned they went, or maybe went away from them and are going back, if I understood you right, Chris. We ultimately have to have a long-range plan in our offices as well. But I do think it's a great opportunity, hopefully, for districts and NRCS to have a discussion on where their long-range plans might align and help both sides. So, next slide, please. Covered this, but the partners we really work with as we deliver our locally led conservation. It could be districts, it could be watershed councils, it could be another federal agency, it could be a joint venture. Joint ventures we have 3 in this state. We have the Intermountain West joint venture, we have the Prairie Pothole joint venture, and then we have the Northern Great Plains joint venture. If you don't know who those folks are, maybe they're new to you, reach out to your DC and ask them who those folks are. And then there are NGOs. When you list somebody, you're always going to forget a partner. But we work with a lot of NGOs across the state. Next slide. So I'll stop there. I know I covered a lot. If anything, I just want to highlight how important this partnership is, but also how important it is for you to develop that relationship with your local district conservationists and that area conservationist. One of the downsides of not having an area meeting in person is getting to build that face-to-face relationship. If you're a new CD employee, please, if you haven't already, make that introduction, even if it's over the phone. Make sure that area conservationists and you have that relationship. You guys can have a discussion on issues if you need. So Lori, I'll stop there. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Kyle. I think that since you guys have such a close relationship with NRCS and your field offices, it's really one of the best vehicles of getting local conservation district or local conservation projects on the ground. And if you use that network, you're going to find you're very effective at getting things done. The next partner is the Montana Association of Conservation Districts, and we have Becca on the phone, who was recently hired, and she's just jumped in and doing a fantastic job. So, Becca?
Hi, Lori, and hi, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. I am Rebecca Boslow. I, as Lori mentioned, have just recently started last month as the new executive director of the Montana Association of Conservation Districts. And just to kind of start in terms of a little background on MACD, you know, we are here to support conservation districts and to support local conservation. So we are your association, and we're very responsive to the needs of the districts. And, you know, along the lines of what came up in that, you know, video for NACD about helping conservation districts have one voice, that is one of the main things that MACD also works on. So go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Thanks. So just a bit of background. We have 18 folks on our board of directors. We have, you know, there's the 6 different areas, and we have 3 people from each area. Currently, our president is Jim Simpson, vice president is Dean Rogie, and our treasurer is Gary Geim. Next slide, please. Thank you. So one of the important ways that MACD and the districts interact, and that the districts are able to really directly, show MACD or tell MACD, what work we need to be doing is through the resolutions process. So this is a process that takes place annually at our annual convention. There's a nice little timeline here, so you can see that districts will write resolutions, and that'll go through your district board. Once it's approved by a local conservation district, it's submitted to MACD by September 1st. This year, we actually extended the deadline to September 15th just because the world is a bit chaotic at the moment. Then those resolutions go to the area meetings and are considered by the areas. And if they are passed by the areas, then they go to the annual convention for a vote by the entire MACD membership of all members in good standing. And it'll go through a committee, which provides an opportunity to consider the resolution, and then the committee will recommend a motion of pass or do not pass for the full membership body, and then the entire membership votes on it. And then once resolutions are passed, it becomes part of the policies and work plan for MACD in the legislative and advocacy activities. And so that directs a lot of our work, and that's a really important process. And then also once resolutions are on file, things can come back up, and because it's been voted on by membership, we can kind of continue working on those year after year. Next slide, please. So I mentioned those committees that the resolutions will go to, and these committees also operate all year long. They are district operations, education, soil resources and land use, and water resources. We also have ad hoc committees. Currently we have the legislative ad hoc committee, which meets monthly and is led by Jeff T-Berry, who is our governance affairs advisor. He's currently contracted. And then we also have had recently the MACD and SWCDM merger committee, which I'll get into that in a minute to explain a bit more. Next slide, please. So I mentioned SWCDM, which is the Soil and Water Conservation Districts of Montana, and they are our sister organization, our very close partner, and they do a lot of work for the districts. Together we work to represent and serve Montana's conservation districts through various policy programs and outreach. And we actually all share the same office in Helena, and we actually share some staff. So it's a very close working relationship. Next slide, please. So, between MACD and SWCDM, since there's a lot of that overlap, some of the main areas that we cover are advocacy and policy. So that can relate to anything legislative that involves conservation districts. We keep track of what's going on in the legislature, and even at the moment, what's going on in all of the interim committees that are taking place before the legislature meets. And we keep the districts in the loop. We've actually commented at some of the committees and have been meeting with staff. We also help organize districts to advocate in the legislature as issues come up. So that can be, figuring out what members we need to have districts contact. It's always really important if something comes up with one of your local representatives to have that district speak to them, because obviously they're most concerned with their constituency. So that's a big piece. And then we'll also work with districts on hosting local meetings with their legislators. One thing that MACD also does is, for each legislative session, we host a legislative meet and greet. This year, we're not quite sure what that's going to look like, but it usually takes place in Helena, and we have our partners there and invite legislators. And in the past, we've had a really good showing, so that's a really good chance to just connect with the legislature. At the federal level, when any resolutions come through, kind of that endpoint on the timeline, anything that relates to, a larger scale will also loop in the National Association of Conservation Districts. And, we also work with and partner with federal agencies on behalf of the districts. And again, just to kind of on that advocacy policy point, a big piece of MACD is helping the districts come together to have one voice. Lori mentioned the legislature giveth and the legislature taketh away, and making sure that we can keep funding going to the districts is really important, and various programs. So it's all about that one voice. In terms of education, there's an education component in terms of educating citizens, and including students, about the wise use and protection of Montana's natural resources. MACD helps districts and partners in providing funding, capacity support, and promotion of events and workshops. In terms of conservation programs, that's a big focus of SWCDM in terms of building capacity, again, that education and outreach component, and also conservation on the ground. Some examples of this that you may have heard of include Ranching for Rivers, Water Quality Mini Grants, the Big Sky Watershed Corps, and the Rolling Rivers Trailers. In terms of technical support for districts, that includes things like website development, email solutions, and graphic design needs. And then, kind of back to that big picture component, MACD is focused on knowledge sharing among the districts, connecting all of the districts and, getting information out to them and communication. And some of the ways we do that include our district dispatch, the monthly conservationist, and also our area and convention meetings. So again, it's about being, your association and serving the districts in all of these different ways. Next slide, please. So here's a bit about our organization chart, which you can see on the right of the slide, just the folks that are in our Helena office. There is me, Stephanie Adams, who's the director of SWCDM, and then Melissa Downing, who is the operations manager and partnerships coordinator. As I mentioned, we also have Jeff T-Berry currently contracted, and he is the MACD government relations advisor. On our chart, you can see just how closely MACD and SWCDM work together. We have a shared staff position, and then also SWCDM works with the Sage Grouse Initiative and has staff, and then has Big Sky Watershed Corps, and also works with the Bridger Plant Materials Center. So we work together very closely. SWCDM actually owns the building that we're in, and that's kind of just a brief overview. A lot of the MACD board overlaps with the SWCDM board as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. And then on the horizon, just some big picture things that are happening. There's a lot of little things happening too, but we don't have time for that today. Happening now, one big thing is the CARES Act funding, which Heidi actually mentioned. So we are in the process of going through the Business Adaptability Grant Program, where basically MACD is able to provide funding to districts through basically buying various, computers or other technology needs that are COVID related. And that grant process has closed, but the big one is the local government reimbursement program, which all districts are eligible for. And I know I sent a message to Kay about this on there, but basically it can cover any direct COVID related costs starting in March 2020. And so that is a huge one. If your district, Heidi mentioned laptops, if you need a laptop to work from home, or if you've been having to use your personal phone or anything like that, I would recommend looking at the local government reimbursement program. I've sent that out to folks, but also if you're just starting and didn't receive that, you can email me, or it's also on our website. Coming up, we have the area meetings, the convention, which is happening the 18th and 19th of November, and then a potential merger between MACD and SWCDM. And that is something that came from our membership, wanting the two organizations to merge, and we have resolutions actually on that. So we're waiting to see, how those go through area meetings and how folks vote on that at the convention. And there has been, again, that merger, SWCDM and MACD merger committee. And so a lot of work has been put into that, and we're, kind of waiting to see what happens at the convention. Coming up in 2021 is the legislative session. As I mentioned, we've been doing quite a bit of work with the interim committees and staying up to date on that. So next slide, please. And finally, just thank you. I'm really excited to be working for MACD to support the local conservation districts. And You know, we are always here to help and support you. And if you need anything, please feel free to reach out at any point in time. And that's all I have for you. I tried not to go too long. So
You did great, Rebecca.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. I'm sure you guys will all agree that Rebecca is very approachable, and if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to give her a call. We're really happy to have you on board. The next part is with Chris Evans, the MACD Education Committee, and at the last area meeting, conservation districts talked about what they needed, and you know, they gave us a huge roadmap on the kinds of things that they wanted to see happen. And Chris decided to take that on for the education committee, and at least they took the education part. Now there's some others that have other committees that haven't quite picked up on it yet, but Chris took the ball and ran with it. So Chris?
Alicia Dempsey is on the call today. I don't know if Alicia, do you want to say anything real quick? Maybe she's not on.
Maybe
she was on.
Muted. Okay. Oh yeah, she's here.
Okay.
Hi guys, thank you so much. Chris, thank you so much for doing this today and helping put everything together. And just want to say thank you.
Oh, okay. So the Education Committee is made up of a number of different MACD board members who meet on education issues. The issues that they meet on are the resolutions that are tagged for education purposes. They've been tracking the historic resolutions from 2005 forward. They also review scholarship applications that are submitted to MACD. They are currently reviewing internal education issues, requests made at the area meeting as part of that survey, and external education issues. So internal would be like conservation district employees and supervisors, and external would be just general public education and legislative type education on what conservation districts do and what we are. We're also doing a lot of coordination with the Conservation Districts Bureau and the employee organization on planning more training, maybe not necessarily more training, but a variety of trainings that districts appear to want as part of that survey. So who's involved? The appointed MACD supervisors, who are actually the Education Committee official members. Administrators and supervisors are welcome to attend our meetings, and as is, of course, the Conservation Districts Bureau staff, DNRC, and then anyone else who's interested in conservation district education issues. I try to have meeting notices out in advance for the committee, and yeah, so anybody's welcome.
Thank you, Chris. Really appreciate all the work that you guys are doing. Alicia, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think that's it. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you too. Okay, the next partner report will be from Heidi Fleury, and she'll talk about the Montana Employees Organization, Conservation District Organization, sorry.
Right? It's a mouthful.
It is. I didn't want to use the acronym. I hate them.
Right? Well, I am currently the vice president of the employee organization, and I am following the president, Tenley Atchison, and she, although some of you may not have met her, Tenley is really amazing. She's really great at doing things for the employees and putting on trainings, and I'm going to be president next year, and so we'll just be going along with the great work that all the employees have put into this organization so far. And I would say that the most important thing about the employee organization is that every 2 years we put on a statewide administrators training. And that training, I've been to 2 of them so far, and they have been invaluable, not just for the information that I learned, but for the partnerships and the friends that I made with other conservation district employees throughout the state. Because you can ultimately feel a little bit alone as a single person working in your office on your conservation district things. And so the employee organization was formed just to kind of have a way for all of us to get together and talk about those things. And so we're looking at the statewide administrators training, and we're looking to hold that in person next year, but we'll see what happens. Beyond that, we have scholarship money available for any administrators. If you find some sort of educational program that you want to be a part of, we can reimburse your district for that cost. We also are working to have a very basic virtual welcome basket that we send out to all new employees. And the main thing that's going to be in there, and the most important thing that'll be in there, is a calendar that tells you all of the dates that you need to remember or know to get your financial stuff done, to get your annual report, your annual financial report to the local government services bureau. I have all these things that everyone has been talking about. They do have deadlines and timelines. And throughout the state, it is going to be a little bit different, but generally those timelines are the same. So we're going to be sending that out to people because that seems like something that I've heard employees need. So again, we have a statewide training every 2 years. We host other trainings in between. And currently I'm putting together a QuickBooks training that will be an online QuickBooks training that we'll all do in a format like this. And then we have scholarships. So thanks to everyone who volunteers with the EO. You can see that we have 6 areas and there are representatives in each of those areas. And so if you don't know your area representative, I urge you to call them and just let them know that you're here if you're brand new, or I'm sure a lot of you have met your area representative. So thanks to everybody.
Thank you, Heidi. We really are thankful for the partnership that we have with the employees organization because they do help us help you. The next segment is on the resources that you can find on our website, and Mary will be showing you some of those.
Hi, everybody. So I am actually not going to click on these, but I do want to kind of let you know where you might find some of these resources. And if you're interested, I can also email those to you too. So the first one that I wanted to talk about is the new administrators handbooks that is housed at the employee organization website that is housed in the MACD website. So if you go to the macdnet.org, you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page and you'll see an employee organization link. So you will find other resources located there. This new administrator's handbook was done in 2015. It does have a lot of pertinent information, but I understand that it is now being updated. So if you don't have a hard copy in your office and you wanted just to have an overview, this is a good location to go and take a look at each of the different tabs and you will learn more about things. The second link I wanted to talk about is our DNRC website, which was revamped last year. It's dnrc.mt.gov. And if you go through the conservation tab, you can find within our card division, we have 3 separate bureaus, and ours is the Conservation Districts Bureau. When you do click on that link, there's a whole bunch of information. But what I wanted to highlight today was the documents and webinar page. On that one, with each in the table, you'll see that they're all drop downs. You'll find forms. You'll find webinars. You might even find just different training opportunities within each of these, within this particular page. And then the next one I wanted to do was to highlight that there are conservation videos from across the state, and I've linked those here. And I will also link that to our website. So you'll be able to just click on these and watch these YouTube videos of some of the projects that have happened, like in Lincoln CD, Flathead CD, Madison, and Lake. And if you do have a conservation video that your district has uploaded to YouTube and you would like that shared on our DNRC site, we'll be happy to post that there too. And that was just my presentation, and I'll turn it over to Lori.
Okay, thank you, Mary. I'm not sure how you guys want to do this. If you have any questions, maybe just enter those into the chat, but you know, maybe while you're thinking of what to ask, I know we covered a lot today, and I'm sure if you're new, you're thinking, oh boy, this seems pretty complex. Conservation district roles and conservation district employees' roles are changing. They're never the same, and they're becoming more complex. If you happen to be an employee who was hired under the guise of, oh, all you have to do is, you know, do our books and do our minutes and run the office, well, you know, you got duped. Your job is really actually a lot more, and it can be a lot more. It can be actually quite fun. It'll allow you to follow your passions and work on things with your board that are really important to you. The good news about it all is that you can pull that new employee card for a long time. I think every conservation district employee will tell you you need a year to make it all the right way around the cycle, and then another year to kind of think, oh yeah, I remember that from a year ago. But really by the third year, you're starting to really kind of sink in. And I do hope for the new employees that you have that, or new employees, that you do have the opportunity to really take these jobs and love them. For me, what inspires me and what's kept me going for so long is seeing conservation districts turn nothing into something. I love it when a conservation district is told that they can't do a particular project, but then really figure out a way to be able to do it anyway. I think that conservation districts with small budgets or large budgets, it doesn't really matter, creating things that are really outside of the norm. We have lots of examples of conservation districts stepping up and doing things that are really blazing new trails for the rest of the conservation districts. That's what inspires me to continue to do what I do, and has been inspiring for me the entire time that I've been working with conservation districts. I hope that you get to a point where you'll be able to do those kind of things too. As you can see, the other good news about that is there is a lot of help, and there's a lot of expertise, and there's a lot of district employees that kind of went through that beginning stage of, oh my gosh, there's so much here, I don't know where to start. And I would invite you to reach out to them. I see a question from Brandy in Ponder ACD, and she wanted to know if there was a scheduled date for 310 training and financial training. And Heidi, you mentioned a QuickBooks training. Do you have a date for that?
I was going to try and do it in between now and the first week of December.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then Jason, do you have any scheduled for just general 310 training where you can get into the nuts and bolts?
So I don't have any general 310 trainings scheduled at the moment for a wide audience necessarily. I'm actually doing one for, we're doing a 310 workshop in Bitterroot for the Bitterroot CD based on some needs they have. My plan is to, after the first of the year, start developing probably what are going to be virtual 310 trainings, just with COVID going on. This summer I would have done 4 or 5 in-person workshops that didn't happen because of that. So yeah, be looking for that after the first of the year, and think about 2 specific questions you have that just helps me develop the training. But yeah, that will be something that will be forthcoming.
Okay, thank you. The key to all of our success is good communication. So we look forward to hearing from you as we continue down this journey together. I did want to let you know that we have another webinar, a monthly webinar scheduled for October 13th, and that has to do with the funding opportunity for COVID. So we'll have some conservation districts that were successful in getting funding that will be sharing their experiences with you. A lot of conservation districts that we've talked to just really aren't sure exactly where to start and how to get going. Rebecca has organized that. She'll have MACD will be represented, and
the
NACO.
Montana Association of Counties.
Yes, yeah. Thank you, Rebecca. So that'll be on the 13th. We'll send out an invite to you if you guys are interested in purchasing equipment that helps you work remotely and to help with some of the expenses the conservation district may have dealing with, you know, kind of the way that you have to operate now with COVID. Those questions will be answered then. Unless we have any other questions, I would say we're done, and appreciate all of your time. And thank you so much to Conservation District Bureau staff, Mary, Jason, Linda, and Dwayne, our partners and friends, Kyle, Heidi, Chris, Alicia, and Julie. We really appreciate your input. Anybody that has any questions, please reach out. So that's it. Thank you.
So nice to see everybody. You all have to turn your cameras on. Yes!
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye. Thank you guys for joining us. Did I see Kay on a exercise bike? Whoa, multitasker. See you all again soon.